Thanks very much, Liam.
How are you? Good stuff. I can always think back to all those years ago when Ireland hosted the Special Olympics, and our president, May Robinson, said, "I've been waiting for this day. Ever since Corolla asked me to do it, I've been wishing I'd said no." So thank you, Corolla. Corolla has been very kind to me over the years and asked me to talk at lots of stuff. And my first response is always to say no, but I eventually always say yes. So thank you for coming. I work in a team for people for a positive behaviour support service based down in the Western Trust in Northern Ireland here, covering County Tyrone, County Derry, and County Fermanagh. So the topic today, and I think it was very nice following after Beth Ann, for one of the things she said was we need to use less language, and I'm always saying that at work. So you notice there's no words on my first slide. On my first slide, there's no words. And I was going through this with the staff yesterday, and as we run through before the event, and I had all sorts of words on it. And the staff says, "But look at that picture. What is it? It's a crank. What is multidisciplinary working? It needs someone to drive, and it needs links in the chain, doesn't it?" So, and then one of the staff says, "And use people, behaviour analysts are a bit cranky too." So I thought it was quite a good analogy. So sometimes we are the people who drive the multidisciplinary process. Sometimes we're part of we're one of the links in the chain. And I think you have to have both. That's what proper multidisciplinary working is. It's working with all of us. So from my perspective, I started nurse training way back in 1982. I know I'm too young. I don't look that old, really. I know that. 1982 to 1985. And at that time, there was a great debate in nursing. Was it an art or was it a science? And certainly, one of the parts of the art was how do you build a relationship with someone who was seen to have a severe mental health problem, have schizophrenia, psychosis. So there's huge emphasis on rapport building, on relationship building. And certainly that's something that has really stuck with me when I came into behaviour analysis. How do we build relationships with people? How do we build relationships with families, with other professionals, other disciplines? How do we do that? How do we maintain those relationships? How do we keep resilience going when people are really struggling? And I think that's something from nursing that I've brought with me all through my career. There was a move in the very early 80s to move nursing onto a more systematic way of working. The nursing process came in, trying to put a process in place, the whole idea that we would assess and plan and implement and review. And they started to use different models of care, like O-rooms and ropers, trying to frame the whole system. So nursing, as you know, is steeped in the medical model. And I just put this wee slide in because behaviours are attributed to the condition. So people with a particular condition are expected to behave like a particular way. So people with schizophrenia are expected to behave like that. But that's very attributable to autism as well. If you think about it in later life, people with autism are expected to behave in a certain sort of ways. So lots of learning. We did a lot of learning as nurses. We learned a lot of signs and symptoms, a lot of etiology. What does a particular with this particular condition have? So, and lots of prescribed ways of treating. So there's almost like, I think Beth Ann used the menu planning. There was, this is what you do with someone who's got manic depression. This is what you do with someone with schizophrenia. So you had a lot of that going on. So, and I put in the contrast because behaviour analysis encourages the definitions of the descriptions of the behaviours, and there are clusters of behaviours that we say make up a condition, which is very true for autism. And we know we can change behaviour using the principles of behaviour analysis. And certainly one of the other things that was happening in nursing in those very early days, nursing was very task-orientated, very, very task-orientated, and there was a move to a very person-centred process, which ties in very nicely with the training that I had over time, because we're very person-centred in our behaviour analysis, because the basis of our behaviour analysis is positive behaviour support, so we're very focused on people and on persons, so very, very much into that. My own working history, once I trained as a psychiatric nurse, I moved over to London and worked in acute admission wards, and when I moved back home with rehabilitation and community services. And there was a lot of talk about behaviour modification. And it was one of these terms, someone did behaviour modification, and nobody really knew what it was. But a lot of the time, we knew there were some of the people we work with were engaging in all sorts of very bizarre behaviours, very ritualistic behaviours, very repetitive behaviours. And we all wanted to help, but we didn't actually know how to help. No idea really how to help. But we put systems in place and we had structure. But institutions by their nature have structure, they have routine. So always searching. There was always something in me searching for answers. I moved on from that and became a manager of a residential home with people with learning disabilities. That was about 21 years ago. And certainly one of the things, a lot of the people who came to live in our home in Lisnaskea, where I was working at the time, came from institutions. And there was a major change in their behaviour when they moved to us. And people saying, it was a miracle. What have you done? But what had we done? We changed the environment, hadn't we? We gave them their own room. They didn't live in a ward. We gave them space. We gave them time. We gave them staff more attention. So we changed a lot of ecological factors, as we would call it, in positive behaviour support. So, and that was sort of thinking, well, what else could we be doing? How else could we enhance their life? And we started doing other stuff like engaging people in more activities and trying to teach them skills. And we didn't really know how to do it. But from a nursing, from my immersed nurse training, that was the sort of stuff. And we were very good at looking after people. We got people well. We made sure we looked after their health and their well-being. And it's amazing how many problem behaviours disappear when people are well. So that was another major piece of learning for me. I then came along and I got a job with Praxis. And Praxis at that time were starting to expand into challenged behaviour services for people with learning disabilities. And we were setting up homes for people with challenging behaviour all across Ireland, head injury services in Cork. And tied in with that was this whole idea that people need to be engaged in activities. So this whole person-centred active support model we were very, very keen on, which again, later I learnt was part of Jim Mansell's initiative that came out of the Tizard Centre, the whole idea of engaging people in activity and giving them meaningful activity. So we're setting up a lot of challenged behaviour services all over the country, which has made Praxis a major expert now in the field of providing services for challenged behaviour. But again, didn't really have an understanding of how to properly support these people. And one of the things that started to change my life was I was at a conference from the Institute of Applied Behaviour Analysis, which is Lavinia. Gary Lavinia held the conference here in Belfast. And then you're starting to tackle a lot of the stuff that I had been doing, because they look at people's health, they look at people's environment, smoothing that fit. They look at engaging people in activity, and they start really delving in really closely. If you've ever seen their behaviour assessment guide, you'd need a month to fill it in. There's so much information that's needing to be gathered for it. And you're starting to think, well, that's starting to make some sense. This stuff's starting to make some sense. I moved on then into another job then managing an adult training centre and respite services in Oma, day services. And what we were seeing at that time, there was lots of people coming in, young people coming out of school with very complex autism. And we never really heard the term. It was quite new. There weren't many people with autism around. And we were being faced with these severe challenging behaviours, and we were going into school thinking, how did you manage them? And we found they didn't manage them. They basically, they sort of took the problem into another classroom, and there was a lot of segregation going on, really, and very difficult to manage. And again, schools are a very different environment because they're smaller. So the smaller numbers and higher supports. So real difficulty in relation to that, but huge complex needs. And we're starting to see people coming out of school with some ideas of using visual structures like teach processes. And again, this was all new to staff. And the adult training centres, if you probably don't know their history, but they were workshops. Their idea was workshops. People did work, they made picture frames, so they had big garden centres. And of course, I was terribly unpopular. I started to close them and started to use the centres, turn them into trying to get areas that we could actually use for the clients who were coming to it. Because the guys who could work in a garden centre could work in a mainstream garden centre with support. They didn't need to have us having a specialised one. So can you keep moving this one? Current role. I'm now a senior behaviour therapist and team leader in our service, and we work with people with severe challenging behaviour. I work in the adult services in the Western Trust, and my colleague Erica here, sitting in the audience, works in children's services. We're very distinctly separate. We're two separate services. I used to work with children and adults in one sector of the trust, and Erica on the other side of the trust, but we've since separated. Positive Behaviour Support Service is the name of our service. Work with people with very severe behaviours, challenged behaviours. And it was very different from Beth Ann. I was thinking of the contrast of it. I was listening to her. Her work's all about skills, developing skills, improving skills, building skills. And my work is all about reducing behaviour. We're trying to stop people hurting themselves. We're trying to stop people being aggressive. And my outcomes are a reduction in behaviours. And sometimes we have to build some skills to get there. But such is the pressure. It sounds like a very grand work in a behaviour support service. I'm the only behaviour therapist in it for 3 counties. So that's one of the things. So there's a pressure to always be moving. So one of the other things about our service is we work where the people are. So we go to family homes, we go to day centres, go to schools for over 18s now. We're in the residential homes, the supported living. That's where we go. That's where we do our work, in those environments. And that's where the people are. We need to see the context they're living in, what staff are actually doing, how they're being supported. So what happened when I got that job? In the times that there was money in the health service, I don't see anybody smiling, but there used to be money in the health service years ago. When I got that job as a senior behaviour therapist coming out of the day centre, they sent me to Canterbury for 3 years to be trained as a behaviour analyst or behaviour therapist. So I went to the Tizard Centre, University of Kent, and did a diploma in psychology of learning disabilities. And they just changed it from a 2-year course in applied psychology of learning disabilities into a 3-year degree course on intellectual and developmental disabilities. There's actually 3 or 4 other parts to this. I'm not going to write all that in, but first and second years were on person-centred planning and positive behaviour support, and the third year was on applied behaviour analysis. And positive behaviour support, if any of you who know it, there is a lot of filling in of direct and indirect observations. A lot of momentary time sampling. They teach you how to do ABC charts. They teach you how to fill in motivational assessment scales and Chabas and Peter Baker's, Guernsey Leisure. A lot of assessment work, looking after a person's health, getting their history. And yet, I was thinking, we're getting a lot of paperwork here, but I was struggling because I still didn't really understand, after 2 years, why are they still doing that behaviour? We could get it stopped, but never really ever understood it. And it wasn't really until the third year that the wonderful Mecca came along and started to teach us applied behaviour analysis. And she taught us about functionality of behaviour and what reinforced and shaped and maintained behaviour. And that's where I met Mecca and Peter over in Tizard, Peter Baker, and Corolla then became my supervisor at home. So that's where I first came in contact with Corolla all those number of years ago. And it really was, and seeing you had your woman going into the bright, that was the moment I said, that explains it. I now understand. Why is that person engaged in that behaviour? And it was a real real light switch moment for me. So a new scientific way to look at and understand behaviour, because we'd been filling in a lot of assessments and collating a lot of data, but we didn't understand it. No understanding of it at all until we started to understand functionality. And so it gave me a new way to understand and read all these assessments and make some sense of it. And we're better able to accurately understand the function of behaviour. And that's what I tell people. I'm a functional behaviourist. We work on function. And a very practical behaviourist as well. And again, it fits in so very well with the PBS model, because now we've got all the person-centeredness, because there are some people who talk about ABA quite negatively, that crank bit that I mentioned earlier, but PBS is very person-centred, and it's looking at the person in their environment and their world. And certainly, it's really, a real key part of what we do is we only start to engage with an intervention when we understand function. And we never start anything else because obviously we can't do that. So completed then the Masters in ABA up in Coleraine with Julian Leslie, Mickey Keenan, Stephen Geller, Claire McDowell, met all those people up there as well. And that really put on loads of extra information. And I suppose in some ways frustrated me a bit, because because then you're starting to, because the TISR course was all about challenging behaviour and reducing behaviour, you've seen all the other strings in the bow where you should really be working a lot on skills development and language development and all of the other things you'd like to do. And my job doesn't give me the time to do that. You know, there isn't that time within my work to actually be doing that. Like so. A few simple truths which AB has taught me. First one, behaviour is functional. And that sounds simple, but I do a lot of training for staff, and I always say to them, if you go away with no other thought after this training, then that person's engaged in that behaviour for a reason. And if you can start to think about why are they doing it, then we can start to unpick the problem. We can start to see why they're doing it, and then we have a way forward. So, and the other thing is behaviour is contextual. And that's a wee bit like thinking we behave differently in different environments. So why are we working with one person whose behaviour is so really well settled and organised, you know, no problems at all in school, which is calm and structured, and really, really difficult at home? Or vice versa. Why are they so well settled at home, and then they go into school and they can't cope with all the noises and all the sensory stimulation and all the demands? A very contextual looking at behaviours. But you and I behave contextually different in different environments. We behave differently at work than we do in a pub. So if you think of it, well, you should. That's the idea. So we're all very contextual in our behaviour. We'll even behave differently in different grannies' houses. So think of that as well. And it's getting one of the reasons. The sort of two things we really work at in function and context. Trying to get staff to understand that. Well, yes, there was a slight difference in going to the Asda in Strabane and the one in Omagh. They're totally different buildings. Because they'll say, hey, they've been in Asda often. They've never been in the one in Strabane before. You might know where Strabane is, but it's nearly in Donegal. So the behaviour in our repertoire has been shaped and maintained by reinforcing consequences. So those are the things that so we are always looking about what is it that's reinforcing the behaviour and what conditions are they always occurring in. And certainly part of the training I do, and I always come back to it, is getting people to think about functionality. And I always have escape first, because if you see someone engaging in the most severe challenge behaviour, the most severe self-injury or severe aggression, it's usually an escape behaviour. In my experience, they're afraid of something. There's a fear, and it's about thinking about. The question you should be asking is, what are they afraid of? What is there in that environment that's causing them that degree of fear? Because if you think about if there was something fearful come into this room now, like say a mouse or a spider or a tiger, what sort of response would we see? We'd see a big response, wouldn't we? It's fairly reasonably sensible looking people. You'd be up in the chair squealing. See, that's what you'll see, a big major change in behaviour when someone is afraid. And something we need to be thinking about as well. And normally that's what we'll have. We'll have a lot of that escape avoidance behaviour going on when people are afraid. So, and then then moving through the functions. Certainly with a lot of the guys I would work with, that this whole idea of behaviour being for attention, a lot of it is really for interaction, because such a low skills base. They don't have the skills to actually engage you in conversation. So you get a lot of repetitive talk. Continually repetitive talk. Certainly working with a guy, and his line was, cigarette, give me a cigarette, give me a cigarette. And what would happen is the staff had thought of this idea they would plan to ignore it. And what happens when you plan to ignore something? Because is the behaviour increased in intensity and frequency? So you got a burst, and it ended up in aggression. So that's the reason I was getting the referral, because this guy was getting aggressive because he wasn't getting a response. So when we went to observe it, one of the things you notice in a lot of these institutions, there's cigarette time. There's a time you get a cigarette. You didn't ever thought of that, did you? And so he never ever asked for a cigarette at cigarette time. So you're starting to think, what's the function? What's the function? So this is what. And so I was saying to the staff, I've been noticing that's about attention. Nah, he's mad about cigarettes. He's definitely it's the cigarette he's after. So I said, well, can we give him a packet of cigarettes and see, can we test this theory? And no, I can't give him cigarettes. GP says he can't smoke. And they nearly all smoke in healthcare, if you ever noticed. They nearly all smoke. So one of the things I said, well, did your GP ever tell you not to smoke? And they says, Did you stop? No. All right, give him some cigarettes. We're only going to test this. Give him the cigarettes. Definitely with cigarettes. I said, well, what has he got? You've made him worse, he says. They've made him worse. Now, I says, well, what do you mean? He says, he's looking about Coke now. Coke. Because he had full access to the cigarettes. So he started he started then looking about Coca-Cola, Coke. So I was thinking, yeah, well, I think that's really now we're starting to see that it's the response you're giving him. So what happens, you see, when you go and ask for a cigarette or Coke when it's not time to get one, is, don't be asking me about Coke. Why are you asking me for a Coke? It's not Coke time, it's not cigarette time. You get a big response. And it's getting staff to understand, or people understand, that a negative response is reinforcing. So that's what was reinforcing behaviour and keeping it going. So eventually, the staff don't actually believe you, even though you've got the data to show it. Staff are very wise, they're all very wise. They all know best. So you always have to prove stuff, and that's what data is very good for doing. And again, one of the things of being a nurse is you're always used working in teams here. There's a great word to have down about Tyrone and Fermanagh. They call it Tran. Staff are all very Tran. So you always have to work with them and get them to understand what you're doing. So you're always building rapport and relationships with them. So anyway, eventually, I said, just to prove it, I said, buy him some Coke and give him all the Coke that he wants. And he says, all right, so he's a diabetic. I said, well, get him Diet Coke, get him some Coke. So there's always a reason they can't do so. Got him the Coke anyway. Next thing he says, shop. And so they actually eventually believed me that it was about attention, that it wasn't about the item, So then what we did was we measured how often he actually asked for the item. And we worked out about every 12 minutes, he felt in a deprivation state for attention, so he started to engage in a behaviour to get topped up. So we got the staff a timer, and every 10 minutes it beeped. We just taught them to go, how are you today, boss? Are you doing well, Pat? You're looking well there. And it was in-out, very quick interaction. Doesn't have the attention to sit and talk to you. Very quick, in-out piece of interaction. Come and help me with the laundry. Come and help me peel these spuds. And the behaviour more or less stopped. So what happens about 2 months later? I got a phone call. He's worse than ever. I said, well, why is he worse than ever? They stopped delivering the interaction because they thought they didn't need to. So that's what happened. So you have to then revisit it and get that. So that's about attention. But a lot of our guys, you get a lot of that repetitive talk, and that's a skills deficit. Gaining tangibles. And again, we think of it all, well, there may be some students here, but most of us work. Would any of us come to work if they didn't pay us? No. So we all engage in lots of behaviour for tangibles, don't we? So one of the things, I went into a home recently, and this mum had retired from work, so she probably wasn't, she wasn't maybe, she had more time. So she decided that her son, who had quite profound autism and learning disability, and he learned disability as well, he was very low skills base, but he's very good in the PlayStation. He could get to level 5 in Call of Duty. Superb, but that's that repetition thing, isn't it? If you practice enough, you get good at stuff. And he's very good. But Mum decided no wisdom, it wasn't good for him. So she took it off him. She got this major burst of challenge behaviour, and he says, Mommy, give it back to me. And he was running around after the house after. And she toughed it out. So she lived through that extinction burst. And she got battered. And I says, wow. But he did, the intensity and frequency of behaviour really increased. And it was just explained to the mum, that's not really, we would never ask a parent to go through an extinction burst. You wouldn't, it's too dangerous. And eventually, what actually happened was she actually set the bar at a level, so he didn't even bother asking anymore, he just started to punch. And he got access back to his PlayStation at some levels as well. So we're trying to teach her how to actually, because what happens as well when she took the PlayStation away for 6 hours, he was playing it for far too long, we weren't arguing about that. But you don't just take 6 hours off him. What does he do for 6 hours? Nothing else to do. He's no skills base. So you needed to do it really gradually and get people to think about the function and give them an alternative to engage in. And then sensory, the other function of behaviour is sensory. And so we all engage in lots of behaviours to meet our sensory needs. Why sometimes if you're sitting now, you think you need to be moving. Your brain wants you to move. You're not made to be sitting all the time. Why does your body want a shower rather than a bath? It's about all those sort of things. And one of the things with what the guys with learning disability is they rarely have the ability to regulate. So what will happen sometimes is some of the guys will get on a swing, and rather than swinging nice and linear, which is nice and calm and relaxing, what do? They twist it. You ever notice? You go to a person's house with some autism, they've twisted this, and then they spin, and it hyperstimulates them. Or they'll start to stimulate their optic nerve by doing a bit of hand flapping, and they way overdo it. So there's no ability to regulate, or they start to move and they'll keep moving, or they'll start to eat too much. And that's our job. Our job is to is just to do that regulating for them. Stop this overstimulation occurring. And certainly another one of the sensory ones that I have had a number of cases with is a guy with pica, and he was continually eating at the inside of cushions, that white fluffy stuff that's in cushions. Pica, edible, he's eating on edible objects. And it's one of the cases, so what you're trying to do then is giving him, and the function, he was doing it whether there was staff around or not, so the function wasn't about attention. Some pica can be about that. And a differential, from a nursing perspective, some people will engage in pica when they're low in iron, so you obviously get that health side of it checked as well. So what we're trying to do is do some sort of response block. No, you can't be eating the insides of a cushion, but then you need to give them an alternative. And what we trialled and what worked was flumps. We gave him flumps to give him the same texture in his mouth, so it was obviously quite textured. So we did the response block. He couldn't eat the inside of the cushion, but he could have access to flumps. So now he doesn't bother. He just keeps looking for flumps, and there's 2 or 3 brands he's after, and it worked very well for him. And one of the big keys that I always be saying to staff is behaviour tends to be multifunctional as well. We have a guy who'll bang his head. He'll bang his head, and it's contextual at the same time. If he's banging his head and he's got a backpack on him, that means he wants you to take him out for a drive. You have to understand that's what it means. Sometimes if you go and place a demand on him that you want him to come and do something, he'll bang his head because he wants you to go away, it's escape. Sometimes he wants you to actually come and soothe him and rub his hand, and he'll bang his head and you come and do it. Behaviour. And sometimes, unfortunately, he quite likes hitting himself. He's getting some sensory feedback. And it's about understanding the context so that you know what the context is and you know how to respond. So it's about reading and responding to that situation and responding appropriately at that time. And that's why it's very hard to give a menu. You need staff to be tuned in, read that behaviour and respond to it. And that's really what that's the art that goes with the science. Reading and responding. I always put up this wee model, and I use it a lot for explaining to staff when I'm out doing staff training. A very simple, crude map of how behaviour is shaped and reinforced. And I just noticed that there's 2-way arrows there, and Mecca would have shot me for those 2-way arrows, but don't worry about them. They're the only ones I could find. I only just got a Mac, those things. So anyway, setting events at the top are those things, that change. That it's about satiation, deprivation, so things that change coping abilities, like change or transition or newness. Like hangovers are quite good at changing how we, why some days do the kids jump in the bed and we like them, and some days it's not so good. It's about those ideas. So physical health and well-being is really important in setting events, and the impact of the environment or who's providing the reinforcer. So wouldn't you rather have a medal like from Nelson Mandela than somebody down the road? Of course you work harder for that. So all of those sort of things that change, motivating. And challenge behaviour, that's a huge area. That's the piece that the nursing comes in. How many times have we went into a case where someone has been really aggressive or self-injures, and it's been to do with their health and well-being because they're not well. And a couple of the things that I'm looking for immediately, are they constipated? It's amazing how many guys with autism are really severely constipated. And one of the biggest culprits for causing it is Weetabix. Weetabix. A lot of the guys with autism are quite like eating Weetabix like biscuits. Did you ever notice that? Dry? No. See, Erica's dry. And one of the things about that is, and that's okay, but you need to drink about 1 litre of water per biscuit. And if you don't drink about 1 litre of water per biscuit, it takes all the fluid out of your gut and gets stuck in there. And then you've got really chronic constipation. And if you've ever been constipated, and thankfully I haven't, but anybody who has would say it is terribly painful. Terribly painful. And then that's what's causing the behaviour. So you need to fix that. I went to the GP recently with a sore ear, and he looked in the ear and he says, there's bugger all wrong with that ear. And it was thumping, it was banging. And then you see some of our guys, and there's stuff coming out of their ears. What sort of pain are they in? So toothache, we had another guy who was being very, very self-injures, and he needed 4 teeth out. Have you ever tried to get a person with learning disabilities teeth removed? You have so many hurdles to crack in relation to getting consents and getting someone, an anaesthetist to do it, and it took 4 months to get teeth out. And you wonder then. So a lot of that is about the nursing experience that I've had. It's about how do we get people there. Another thing, another real setting event is around menstruation for the ladies. And women, the majority of the staff who work in services are women. And they're useless at looking after other women around that time. There's never see pain relief being organised properly, or these evening primrose oils, or thinking about any hormone therapy. You know, there's lots we can be doing at that time. You know, the hot blanket, the hot water bottles, and a wee bit of TLC. They're absolutely, and they look at you and think, no, I do that at home. I do that. Yeah. Don't do it. Don't do it at work. You know, so that's where we do a lot of our work. We get in, and then the other part of that whole setting event is the environment. What's going on in that environment? What can we fix? What can we fix there in relation to the noise, the interaction? Is the person bored, or are they overstimulated? And that's getting that balance for people. Because that's often what's happening in the place that we go to. Staff are not reading. That sometimes, you know, you'll go in and the person is actually way overstimulated. You can see their pupils dilated, and they need to go somewhere nice and calm to get calmed down. And the staff are not reading that. They're not seeing the white face and the dilated pupils. And they just, you know, and so then they take them on an activity and wonder why they wreck the bus and break a window. Because the person's not calm enough, and they're not doing the simple calming activity, like seeing could they do a very simple inset jigsaw and wait for 2 minutes on a timer to see how they calm. You know, so that's reading and responding to behaviour, so important. You know, so an antecedent event is something that triggers an immediate trigger. So if a person, you know, if our brain's job is to keep us balanced in all things, you know, and that's what it is. You know, why did you ever suddenly in the night decide you needed cheese and onion crisps? Body wants a bit of salt. So that's the job of our brain. So we're always looking at it. So if an antecedent event is, say a guy is feeling deprived of attention, and suddenly the antecedent event is a member of staff or a mum comes into the room. The behaviour is self-injury. Mum comes over and either sues them or tells them not to do it. So they're getting positive reinforcement for that. So the same set of circumstances occur, they'll do that behaviour again. Punishment, as most of you know in the room, doesn't, you know, it means that the behaviour is less likely to occur in the future. So we don't tend to engage in behaviours that are punished. And when I do this training for parents, they'll always talk about punishment, but behaviourally, we all know punishment doesn't mean that. It just means we're less likely to engage in behaviour. And it's like, you know, as in, if I told you a joke and you didn't laugh, you'd have punished my joke-telling behaviour. It doesn't mean an aversive is going to happen to me. You know, so, and so it's getting those pieces organised. And this is often the best part of the training session. The parents will start throwing you behaviour. They'll tell you a behaviour. They'll say, "Go on, talk about this behaviour. This is what my child does," and you can fit it in. And why is it happening sometimes and not other times for them? So it's just a very simple little diagram that we would use writing regularly. So my role is to understand the function of the behaviour and to give the person an alternative means of gaining that function using desired, not problem behaviour. So one of the things, when I probably jump it, the other piece is the consequence. A lot of people out in the world, they misinterpret consequences. Consequences happen immediately. So if the behaviour is biting and the person goes away out of the room, saying to them that on the Saturday or 2 or 3 days later they're not going out in the bus, that's not a consequence. Consequence has already been delivered. The person has left them. You know, so it's about getting staff to understand what consequences really are, and what they're talking about is what behaviour we talk about as a response cost at a later date. It's getting staff to understand that we don't use punishing strategies with clients. So the function, you know, that is our role, and it sounds very simple. Understand the function of the behaviour and to give the person alternative means of gaining that function using desired. So we have a guy who bites a lot when you place the demand on him, and we have taught him to use his no card. And he actually is quite good at using the F word as well. And if you hear the F word, you know that better to hear the F word than to be bitten, because nobody really likes to be bitten. Biting's very functional. Very functional, works. You know. So interventions, there is an enormous wealth of literature and research that has been conducted. And no matter what problem you have, very easy to get into, JABA, look it up and see what people have tried and use the basis of that. So lots of evidence-based interventions. Applying the science in the real world is not easy, because there's a lot of variables at play, you know, because sometimes it's not ethical to wait until you get all your direct observations done or collect all your data. If you know there's a problem you can fix, you got to fix it, because you can't ethically let people hurt themselves. So understand sometimes what has actually made the difference, because what often happens is the person might end up in hospital, somebody's changed their medication, there's new staff with them, there's 5 or 6 things that's changed and they've settled, and then there's an environmental change as well. So you usually have a lot of that, and especially with more severe challenge behaviour that we would deal with, there's a desperate need to get it stopped. And people don't really care. They don't really want to be filling in the ABC charts for you or collecting data for you. But that is what our outcomes are. What is the behaviour at this level? How many? 80 times in 1 minute. I count. You know, I seen a guy hitting himself in the head. But how ethical is it to be counting that? You need to get it stopped. You know. So, and then what's our outcome at the end? Like so. So we're always looking at the least restrictive and most effective intervention, and that has to be central to what we do. Least restrictive, most effective, and really that's it. So yep. Move on to multidisciplinary and multi-agency working. And certainly that, at every time I'm working, I'm certainly using the principles of ABA, but it's quite difficult a lot of the time to be getting the data that we need, because it's a very fluid situation a lot of the time. So you're using the principles, you're trying to understand what people are telling you, you're trying to go in and do some naturalistic observation to see what you're seeing. And you have to try. Sometimes you have to try, because someone is hitting their head 300 times a day off a floor. You've got to do something to get it stopped. So it's very fluid, practical. So, and certainly because of the training before in psychiatric nursing, we have a broad range of skills in relation to looking after people's health, looking after the environment. You were continually looking at the ecology as the physical and social environment. So you're always changing. How do staff interact? What is their tone of voice? How many words are they using? Far too many. Usually far too many words. I'd be saying to them, use one word and use a picture. Or use no words, just use the picture. You know, get the words in, because what you get is a blur of going down to your room there and get your coat in your bag. And what happens? They go down to their room, and then the staff say, nothing's lazy, all they do is lie in their bed. The only instruction they had was go to their bed, like so, or to go to their room. So broad range and development, and certainly. I suppose because of the training, we're able to do a lot of things for people. So sometimes our involvement with our agencies can be reduced, because sometimes we have to go in and do it and get it fixed. I see Erica nodding her head there, so she's agreeing. So I work closely and collaboratively with lots of other disciplines, especially social work, because social work are the people who have the door into getting the resources, because we need resources. To support people with severe challenge behaviour, we tend to need more staff, we tend to need more space, we tend to need bespoke packages of care for daycare, we need individual sheltered, you know, and they are the people who make the applications for those things. They would be the gatekeepers to the money. It used to be, but now it's gone up a level or two, but they still make the application. And so you have to help them write those applications, make sure that in those applications that the information that they need about the severity of the behaviour has been relayed to them. Work closely with psychiatry. Again, there are so many side effects to medication that so many staff on the ground don't see, because those drugs like risperidone and olanzapine, which are there to help calm and people cope with stresses of life, there are also big side effects, agitation, restlessness. You know, so are they helping? Which I've seen some of the work you did earlier is about evaluating that. You know, so often it doesn't help because the dose gets too much. Speech and language therapy. We actually in our trust at one stage we got 3 speech and language therapists specifically for functional communication, because all our other speech and language therapists used to only do swallowing assessments. But unfortunately now our 3 ones that we had specifically for functional communication are now doing swallow assessments too. So, yes, we lost them as well. And also work closely with occupational therapy, because our occupational therapist is a sensory therapist, so she's very good at understanding sensory processing and what's going on in relation to sensory processing. And I suppose the people I work the closest with are parents and carers, mostly parents and carers, supporting them. And I suppose that's again the nursing, building that relationship, building their resilience, really working and supporting them. And again, and I've seen the guys from Positive Futures names on the board, but I didn't see any of them here, work very closely with other agencies, supporting them and training them, making sure they've got the skill sets they need, making sure they understand the behaviour, modelling for them, a lot of that work as well. So I think I'm coming to my last one, not too badly off time, am I? Okay. So last one then, so using the principles of ABA to inform care planning, certainly I would get involved in a lot of people who are coming to change in their life. And sometimes it's about making sure people are planning transitions, that if they're moving from respite services for children's, which is really very nice, to the one for adults, which is not quite as modern or new, that we're planning it, that we're getting visits in, that we're doing things in a nice graduated manner so people can cope and tolerate. Again, change, transition, but in all aspects of their care, to making sure that we're using sound behavioural principles around how we're going to manage help the person change and deal with whatever's going on in their life. Gaining resources, a lot of that is around us needing to get environments right. So a lot of that is, because our day centres are too full, too many people in them. Some of our residential homes are just, at the end of the day, which of us would like to share our lives with 15 strangers? We wouldn't. So it's about getting people the resources they need and getting those environments right. And often you'll go into a day centre and everyone is in the one area, and there's lots of other spaces we could be using and utilising. Spend a lot of time educating staff about behaviour. Amazing amount of facilities you go into, and people have different types of incentive plans, or as we call them, schedules of reinforcement, and they've got all these things going, and they're using them the wrong way around. They've got it's for everything they do wrong. They lose time, rather than the other way around, that you start with nothing and you earn reinforcers. And amazing how often someone will earn a reinforcer and they'll decide, well, you did something wrong this morning, you're not getting it, and then they wonder why they're getting bursts of behaviour. So it's about making sure they understand the underlying principles of how we use schedules and how we interact with people, and how we differentially reinforce behaviours by giving a good response to that, rather than high levels of response to problem behaviours and none to desired behaviours. So it's getting people to understand a lot of that sort of stuff. And again, trying to get people to use our structures and putting communication systems in place. And I suppose in many ways, we're trying to do a lot of that on our own with very limited resources. Because of the group we're working with, we don't have time to sit and do the skills development work. So training, a lot of leading of staff, because we have to do the modelling. We have to go and show staff how to do it. And I keep using this word "we" when it's only me, but anyway, that's just it. But we do model and shape and differentially reinforce their behaviour when they're doing it right. And then motivating staff, and that's again part of that whole differential reinforcement. So taking a sort of a swing through it, but I would certainly think behaviour analysis has really enhanced. I think it really dovetails well with the nursing, because you need to have both. You need to have all of that, especially in challenge behaviour services. You need to make sure you're looking after all those physical health problems and that whole communication stuff. So there you go, good stuff. Thank you. Are you finished?